I've often said it's good to get different perspectives on what's happening in your country. Very often we have a look at what the Irish newspapers are saying about what the state is going on in the UK. As I said before, I think Flinian O'Toole, I think his name is, very, very good. I think that's his name. I think it is. But yeah, he's very, very good. Ian Dunt, he may be in the UK, but he's very, very good writing about Brexit. We've covered stuff before, again from Der Spiegel, Der Spike, I think it is. Again, that's a newspaper in Germany that covered Brexit quite a bit. But again, we've also covered stuff further abroad. So we've covered stuff from like the Sydney Herald. We've covered stuff from a Japan newspaper, if you may remember that far back, and even they were like going, yeah, we don't even really understand what's going on with this Brexit stuff. What the British are doing doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, leaving, of course, your most successful business relationships and trading partners. Why are you doing this? And of course, today we're turning over to the Hindustan Times, which is a newspaper, I believe, in India. So you've got to remember this in context, because pre and sort of post sort of referendum, Brexiteers were all about, we are going to get these trade deals. It is going to be absolutely amazing and fantastic. And one of the big things they wanted to, along with the Americans that they wanted to get a trade deal with, was, of course, India, New Zealand, and, of course, Australia as well, sort of bringing the Empire 2.0 back. And even India at that time said, we will not become a new imperial bazaar. And very much so, India has been very, very protectionist of its economy. So the idea that Rishi Sunak can go and crack open the Indian economy for us to sort of take advantage of with a new trade deal, very, very unlikely. And to be honest, in the article we're going to go over today, they are delivering the verdict. As they can see, they are basically saying, after 7 years, the victor is clear. It was Europe, that Europe has won in not only just the Brexit talks and negotiations, but even in the post-Brexit settlement. The UK is destined not to do well compared to its European counterparts. So let's go diving on into this. But before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the Buy Me a Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club. That was it. I'd forgotten completely about. Yes. Something else I knew. It was, yes, the Pony Club also down below as well. So as always, thank you so much to all those people who do help and support the channel in those ways. Like I say, again, links down below. But even if you do, just click on the like and share button. Like I say, thank you very much. It all does help support the channel. So let's crack on into this then. Like I say, this comes from the Hindustan Times. The title of, after 7 years of Brexit talks, Europe has emerged as a clear winner. In 2020, Britain devised a new tactic to insult its European neighbours, a long-standing hobby. The diplomat representing the EU in London would henceforth be denied the rank of full ambassador, a courtesy routinely granted to the bloc despite it not being a country. Instead, the man from Brussels would be granted a much lowlier status as an envoy of an international organisation, sending him tumbling down in the protocol order. And the plan was later revised after the EU reciprocated. Contrast that this week, when the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was invited to meet King Charles III at Windsor Castle. Forget the tabloid barbs pardon me, about unelected Eurocrats. A royal aide dubbed her a world leader, and the sort of worthy of high tea. Whatever the opposite of a diplomatic snub is called, this was it. And Miss von der Leyen's tea was capped off in a watershed visit. On February 27th, she reached an agreement with Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, on how to handle the pertaining, of course, to Northern Ireland. This had been the last and most inscrutable piece of the Brexit puzzle. Because the region needs to somehow remain largely part of both the EU single market and the United Kingdom to avoid reinstating a previously troubled border with Ireland. It was a complex deal and has put the issue to bed. I certainly disagree with that. It's far from put the issue to bed. That's certainly for true. Maybe not as inflammatory maybe as it once was, but it's still, the fires are still there. But anyway, back to it. So the divorce between Britain and Europe has been legally pronounced in 2020, but 4 years after the referendum in June of 2016. But only now do we know what the future living arrangements will actually look like. The wonks are currently poring over the Windsor Frameworks, and it looks like a balanced agreement that allows both sides to save face and move on. Looking at the overall shape of Brexit, it has been haggled over in the past 7 years, however, leaves a different impression. Just a glance at the cast present of the final stage of the Brexit talks offers a hint at which policy has had a rougher time since talks began. Mr. Sunak is Britain's 5th Prime Minister since the referendum, and his Conservative Party is heading for a thumping defeat next year. See, even they recognise just how badly the Conservatives are going to be defeated next year. Thanks in no small part to the endless spats over Brexit. And Miss Ursula von der Leyen, by contrast, is just the second person in her job in that time and will probably get another 5-year term next spring. The manner in which Britain left the EU has turned it into a national psychodrama, and polls indicate that most Brits think leaving the club was a mistake. In Brussels, dealing with Britain's latest twist was only just the occasional agenda point. Vote Leave campaigners had claimed that London would hold all the cards in the talks with the EU, and in fact, the opposite turned out to be true. Britain imagined it could craft a way to leave the Union but retain all the stuff it cared about, like some access to the single market. Or did it? In truth, nobody ever worked out what Britain really wanted, and setting priorities was terribly square for the likes of Boris Johnson, the devilishly foreign-turned Prime Minister, who then steered Britain through much of the haggling. Far better to quip about wanting cake and eating it too. A rotating cast of them Brits arrived in the Brexit talks, with fuzzy notions being treated like Switzerland or even Ukraine. Opposite them were the seasoned bureaucrats trying to carrying the very weighty briefing packs, pointing out why it was not going to be like that. There was no whiz team that could be beat at the negotiating table. Yet, the EU deserves its plaudits. Its own aims were clear. Brexit should be a one-off event, not serve as a precedent. No country remaining in the EU could be in doubt that departing from the club would leave them worse off. To achieve this, Britain would need to get a raw deal, and London hoped it could divide and conquer the remaining 27 members of the EU. An often savvy negotiator for his own interest in the 47 years, it was a member of the bloc, it turned out, to be all but C in negotiating against it. Michel Barnier, a former French minister who became Brussels' point man on Brexit, ensured that the national capitals were kept fully up to speed in the talks. When it came to the nitty-gritty of coming to the agreement on terms, the triumph was on the EU side, and was to play into its reputation as an inflexible bureaucracy capable of only ticking boxes. Countries looking to join the EU are familiar with this approach. Here's what you have to do. Now, do it, which was broadly recycled for the only country trying to leave it. Once the 27 remaining countries had decided amongst themselves what they thought was fair, Britain had little choice but to jump through the hoops designed by its negotiating foes. The tone was set early on, and Britain had to agree to pony up over £35 billion to get to the next stage of talks, for example. And that fund was its share of the Eurocrat pensions to try and quibble, but ultimately just had to pay, and so it went. Just one last insult for the road. In an irony of slews of disregarded Brexit negotiators in London that will not have will not be missed, the Windsor deal shows shows the inflexible EU approach had been an act all along. It turns out the Commission had lots of scope to accede to Britain's demand, but ask for permission from a member states later. It just hadn't wanted to before. Indeed, Britain had achieved a better deal than anyone expected, although that might not be saying much. In part, that is because the EU had long ago achieved its main aim. Not even the maddest politician, not even the maddest populist on the continent thinks about leaving the club would be better off nowadays. The departure of Mr. Johnson, the once purveyor of the soaked up Brussels bashing stories, for the Daily Telegraph also helped. The war in Ukraine has also stressed the importance of a continental unity, and Britain remains a key NATO ally. America presses both sides to do a deal, having bulldozed its way into a negotiating victory, and the EU saw very little point in hammering the point home. So the offer, of course, a royal meet and greet was one that signed of a much happier relationship between Britain and its continent may now be in the offing. Nothing is likely to change in the short term. Europe has a continent-wide election next spring and a few months before Britain goes to the polls. For now, all sides are relieved that after 7 years of talks, the deal is finally done. But one side has been quite more happy about it than the other one. So, yeah, that's the state of play. And that's coming from, as we said, someone who's in India who sat and has looked at it. And I agree. We said this again right from the beginning. The UK had no idea. It had no plan of what it actually wanted to believe. Instead, it believed in this fantasy, very much indulged in by the Brexiteers, that once we left, we would be given everything we could ever possibly want. And we always have to say this. Why on earth do you think that would have been the case? And it all comes back to saying, oh, well, they need us more than we need them. What? Why? What do you think? What do you mean they need us more than we need them? There was a ton of stuff in this regard, which, when you look at it, never really made sense. And ultimately, he's going to go down in history as this was bad. This never worked out well for us. We've sort of shot ourselves in the foot. You're seeing the British public saying, not only do we want closer ties with the EU, but all Brexit was a mistake, which, again, as we said, will ultimately lead us to rejoining the single market customs union at some point down the road, and then eventually becoming probably a full EU member again. Yeah. We said it all the time. We have really taken a hit to our national GDP, and any future government beyond this one, even the next Labour government, is going to have to start doing deals with the EU, working together on various bits and pieces, closing the gaps. And eventually, it might be Keir Starmer, who knows who might be, someone will turn around and just go, right, this is Brexit. This is as best as it is ever going to be. And us not being in, the single market, customs union, EU member, is costing us billions by not being in there. And eventually, that is what's going to happen. And I think it will be after the next election, because ultimately the Tories are going to take an absolute pounding at the next election. And this is going to clear, I think, the decks of a lot of the Brexiteers, certainly in the parliamentary party. And then you're going to get more people start to speak up about Brexit. And we are slowly but surely starting to see that, because there are no positive benefits to leaving the EU. There were never any to begin with. These were the big fantasies, of course, the Brexiteers pushed. But This is what they desired. This is what they apparently wanted at the time, but again, haven't been delivered on. And even now, you have Brexiteers who still insist that this isn't proper Brexit, that we haven't Brexited enough. And again, go back in time where we said it, that Brexit was never enough for these Brexiteers because they always had ulterior motives, which was basically this free market fundamentalist belief that they wanted to just completely tear up all the rules and regulations and just let the markets and the government should just not be involved in regulating the markets. That is the biggest, deeply held belief of most of these Brexiteers, and they saw leaving the EU as a way to be able to achieve that. And recently, when you had Liz Truss try to pursue that economic fantasy, she pretty much almost crashed the economy and almost destroyed the UK pension industry. So never forget that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, as always, and please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the One Nation link called Buy Me Coffee, there's the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club down below as well. And as always, we'll see you all next time.